So thank you all for joining, and thank you for Eric for letting us present. So my name's Lizzie, and I'm in regulatory documentation at Roche, and my colleague Lycaria is in program management at Roche. So we're just going to give a brief overview of our one of our regulatory functions, and then we're going to go on to a bit of our graduate scheme as well. So my next slide. Okay, so yes. As mentioned, so we're just going to go do a quick overview of our regulatory affairs functional team and a few of the different regulatory roles that we have at Roche. We're going to go as well have a little focus on regulatory writing, and then that's what I'm going to cover. And then Lycaria is going to move on to the graduate trainee program experiences, what it's like to work at Roche, and how to find vacancies and apply. So without further ado. So our regulatory team at Roche is made up of quite a few sub-functions, as you can see on the screen, at multiple sites around the globe. So we contribute to the development of our regulatory strategies and the interactions that we have with health authorities. So it's important for us that through our role, we can deliver medicines to patients by following the global and regional regulations. We work closely with a wide variety of stakeholders, both internally and externally of PDR, to ensure that we support the overall goals of our product development organisation. So as you can see on the diagram, these are the key functions that are represented in PDR. So some of our main ones are, for example, the EU partner and the US partner. These sit within our programme management function. PDRD, which is highlighted, which is where I sit, and another example is PDR labelling as well. So the overall goal of the RAFT concept is to ensure the provision of consistent input from PDR to our lifecycle teams, our global development teams, and also our project teams. So the driving principle is to facilitate collaborative teamwork by providing a guiding framework for our individual sub-teams to work within and to adapt to their own specific circumstances. So, for example, in our kind of core RAFT meetings that we have, we use these meetings to develop and implement global regulatory strategy throughout the life cycle of our product. This can be anywhere from entry into human to post-approval lifecycle management. We also get involved in assessing and communicating regulatory opportunities and risks, managing regulatory agency interactions and relationships, and driving the best possible product label based on the data that we have available from our products. And then, so that's kind of mainly the diagram on the left. And on the right, we do have some additional regulatory functions that can get involved, like, for example, regulatory information management, which is Reg IM, regulatory intelligence, DRA affiliate, which is our kind of local country regulatory personnel, compliance, and CORA as well. So that's a brief overview. So having a slightly closer look at regulatory documentation, I fear saying documentation that people might switch off, but I promise it is a bit more interesting than the name may seem. So one thing I'd like to maybe highlight is the fact that in the function, we can be considered medical writers, but at Roche, because we do have a key strategic role, we are considered regulatory documentation scientists. So some of our main responsibilities, so we essentially prepare the documents to meet the needs of health authorities by utilising our experience in science, writing and the regulatory environment, understanding and presenting clinical data clearly within documents, collaborating with cross-functional teams to develop clear and scientifically accurate key messages, managing the life cycle of documents from initiation to submission, and ensuring timelines are met for submission of documents to support approval or maintenance of product licenses. So I just wanted to do a slightly closer look at our team and the documents that we write. So on the left is a diagram of the team that I work in on a daily basis. So these are some of the key stakeholders that we work with in documentation at Roche. So as mentioned in the previous slide, one of our key responsibilities is understanding and presenting clinical data. So this means that we have to work very closely with our colleagues in clinical safety and biometrics to ensure that we, as the documentation scientists, have interpreted the key messages of the data correctly so that we can provide the most accurate interpretation of the results that we have received from our studies. We also have to work, another example, very closely with clinical operations to gather site-specific information which is a crucial step that we require when we compile our dossier to send to health authorities. So that's kind of the team that I work in. And then closer look at some of the documents. So in documentation, we are responsible for providing a wide range of documents, which include clinical, non-clinical, safety, and registration documents. So this spans our entire portfolio from, oncology to neuroscience, and from early to late stage development as well. So all of these documents are vital, and we use them all to form this something that we call the ECTD, which is another name for our dossier. Which we then submit to health authorities. So the role of the writer as such also varies based on the document that we are writing. So for example, one of our most common clinical documents that we write is the clinical study report, and it requires us to work very closely with the data, as previously mentioned, and it evokes more of a technical skill set than some of the other documents that we write. Whilst on the other hand, one of the registration documents that we commonly write is a briefing package. So we submit these briefing packages as part of a request for scientific advice that we go to health authorities for when we would like advice or want to ask questions on our study design or our clinical development plan. So our role as a writer takes on a much more strategic approach for this document, as we try to develop the best possible questions to ask our health authorities to ask for advice on. So that's a very brief overview of our role as regulatory documentation scientists at Roche, and hopefully that's given you all a bit of insight as to how we work. And I welcome questions at the end, but for now I will pass on to Vicaria.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks for giving us this overview. I'm going to go a bit broader now again. So I'd like to talk to you a bit about the graduate trainee program that's available in regulatory UK, and it's in the global regulatory affairs. And I just want to give you some insight into all the different components to it. So to begin with, really, this program is not just one specific function, so it covers both documentation and program management and labeling. And me and Lizzie are both part of this program, and we're currently on our second year in the program. So this 2-year program gives you a lot of support. So you're given both a mentor as well as line managers and activity leads, but also buddies within your level of the function. And then there's also an international regulatory trainee network, both in the UK as well as in Switzerland in the headquarters in Basel. And beyond that, there's also an early careers forum that we have in Roche UK, which encompasses all different entry-level functions, from biostatistics to regulatory, and we all join together once a month and have really insightful presentations and networking events. Other than the support that we're given, we also have the ability to get involved in different organizing committees, whether it's different lunch learning sessions in the regulatory department or different knowledge sharing forums where we present different filing learnings or molecule specific learnings and beyond. And both myself and Lizzie are part of those committees where we help determine the agendas, bring in people, and this helps with liaising even outside of your project network. And then in terms of what we actually do in the program, we get to the opportunity to work on multiple different products in different therapy areas. So whether you're in program management or you're in documentation, you can be working in different therapeutic areas and in different phase 1, but also phase 3 products. And that really gives you a great breadth and overview of the large pipeline and the different kind of regulatory opportunities you can have at each stage of the life cycle. And beyond also the actual projects that we get to work on, there is the opportunity to do a 6-month rotation anywhere in the business, which is a really great offering that the program has, since regulatory affairs really does work with a lot of cross-functional stakeholders, and having the opportunity to work in one of those departments really benefits your development as a regulatory professional later on. And it really does expose you to all the different parts of the business, which, as we know, the pharmaceutical industry has multitudes of options. And it's important to say that this program really does allow you to get exposed to, but also trusted with challenging tasks. You're not really working as an intern, rather you're there as a valuable member of the team, providing support, but also learning and given a lot of training and resources to be able to do your job. And most importantly, we get to work on projects that really help patients tomorrow. And that's definitely not an understatement. I think we both work on projects that we see the impact every day. Next slide, please. And now just to say how it is to work in an industry or a company like Roche, I just want to highlight that we have these company values, courage, integrity, and passion, and these really encompass all the work that we do, no matter if it's in regulatory or if it's in clinical operations. It really reflects our commitment to the patient, but also our kind of courage to lead in this different, changing and challenging environment, whether it's COVID or whether it's digital world and the personalized healthcare space. Roche really trying to innovate in all those different changing and challenging environments. And Roche as a company really promotes career development and horizontal movement. So the rotation, which is part of our program, is a great example of how Roche really seeks to develop their employees to their best potential and not just in the silo of their own functional role. And most importantly, we're really a global community with a diverse and very fun amount type of people who really enjoy working together, and we understand the different backgrounds and we use them to give our work more depth. And this also reflects in how our learning and development works, and with all the different support that you can achieve. I think the company really just tries to focus on everyone's well-being and being comfortable wherever they are. And I think I'd like to close on the next slide with how you can find the vacancies. So Roche UK has a site here, and we've linked the website, and you can constantly check that to see what new openings there are, whether they're the graduate program or other entry-level positions. And we also have the talent pool here. And in the backup slides, you can find some more job-specific roles. I think that's all we had to say. And we're open to have any questions, and also to connect with us on LinkedIn if you're interested to learn more.
Well, thank you very much. We do actually have a question. When do applications for the graduate trainee program in regulatory at Roche open, or Roche?
So they usually open at the beginning of the year, so around the January timeframe. However, it's not set that every year there is recruitment. So it's still to be determined if the recruitment will happen this year, or even it could potentially change the time frame. So I would really recommend to check the website, but in previous years the recruitment has happened in the beginning of the year.
Okay, and typically how many people could apply for this graduate trainee? How many people would you take on?
We have usually, I'd say, about 3 people per year. So usually it's 1 person per function, I think. But it always depends really on the researching requirements and how the different projects need the different trainees. But I would say it's probably 1 person per function, so documentation, program management, and labeling, and then TBV.
Okay. How can you stand out in applications?
I'll do that. Okay, so maybe one thing I'd recommend, I think it's really clear when you're passionate about something. I think our normal application process involves a cover letter and your CV. So, for example, if you're writing a cover letter, I mean, it's quite standard advice, but I feel like if you really know what you're writing about and what the subject and you have passion for it, I think this can translate into your application. And I think, I mean, as working for a company, one of our core values is, as Glyceria mentioned, passion, and that's something that we're really enthusiastic about here at Roche. So that would be my advice on that subject.
Okay, and is there anything else that you think is valued in the candidates of the graduate programs?
I would say also the skill of communication should not be overlooked, and communication can come in many different forms in your previous experiences, and I'd really try to dig into what you've done in the past that could show how you work well with people from different backgrounds, with different functions, and how you've worked together communicating to achieve a common goal. I think that's definitely something we encounter every day in our jobs, and it should be showcased.
Okay, is there an upper age limit to apply for the graduate training program, and what prior qualification is required?
There's no age limit. No, there's no limit. The requirement is to have a scientific degree, a bachelor's, and anything beyond that is welcome, but equally is not a requirement.
Okay, and if you have experience in other areas of pharma, QC or /QA, do you welcome applications to RA positions from that area?
I can take this one. So yeah, I think at Roche we really value these transferable skills that you get. Just because you don't have experience in this one function that you might be applying for doesn't mean that you can't bring your experience from the function that you have got experience in. You know, we really value having these alternative opinions, and that's how we grow and learn as teams to have, as I say, these alternative experiences. So I think, yes, it's definitely encouraged. Any experience that you can make applicable, I think, is important. As Glyceria said, communication, you know, it comes in many forms, and you know, where you can make it apply. I think we really value that and welcome that, Roche.
Yeah, that is not a question similar to quality assurance. Somebody would like maybe to move from quality assurance, that would obviously be possible. So how long after graduation can you apply for the scheme? Is there a certain time limit or timeline?
I would probably go back to what Glyceria said. I don't think there's an age limit, so I don't think it has to be, you have to have graduated recently to apply for the graduate scheme.
Okay. This is an important question, of course. Why do you enjoy your role? What is it that you enjoy about it?
Yeah, I mean, personally, so I'm working in program management, and what I really enjoy is having the kind of direct communication with the health authorities and getting to be in meetings and preparing all these different strategic documents. I think I really enjoy the kind of enthusiasm of preparing for the meetings and kind of being able to kind of influence, but also hear the perspective of these really reputable and respected experts in their fields, and just being in those discussions is really, really interesting.
Okay. Lizzie, and anything to add?
Yeah, I would echo what Glyceria says. I would say in documentation, something that I found following graduating from university is that I didn't recognise that there were jobs that you could have outside of the lab following the degree that I did. So I studied pharmacology. So it's really nice to see that I can use the skill sets that I developed at university at a job where I don't have to work in a lab, working with documentation, essentially writing these clinical study reports. It requires a lot of technical understanding and as I said before, like the clinical interpretation, which I really, really enjoy. And like Glyceria said, the enthusiasm of everyone that we work with is unparalleled, I would say. So yeah.
Okay. overall, how long is the application process for either the graduate program or regular vacancies from, from submitting documents until all the way being offered a position?
I would say at least the application timeline that me and Lizzie experienced was about a 3-month timeline. Yeah, from the moment you submit your initial cover letter, and then there's 2 stages until you can receive an offer.
Okay. And what professional training do you offer for new people? And what is the flexibility in terms of working from home?
In terms of professional training, TOPRA offers many courses, and I know that many colleagues in the regulatory department in Roche are given opportunities to participate in courses offered by TOPRA. But there's also other forms of learning that we provide internally, whether through workshops with previous health authority experts can come in to talk to Roche sometimes, and we have workshops, or there's other platforms like LinkedIn Learning and such, which can be used for learning. And I think for the specifics, it will be hard to kind of say more. In terms of working from home, we're currently working from home. Who knows till when? I mean, COVID is here. But even before COVID, Roche was really flexible. So I'd say the company is flexible.
Okay, thank you, George. There is another question about whether you can apply for the regulatory role at Roche from another area or another industry, but that's obviously the case. I'm just going to read this question out to see if in terms of proportion, what percentage of salary do you currently get in comparison to someone who has completed this 2-year course? For example, do you get paid 50% of what someone who has finished this course would get? I'm not sure if that's something you would be able to answer, but
I don't know.
I think it's a graduate program, and I think it's hard to get into an entry-level regulatory program without one. So I don't know what more we can really say.
No.
The graduate program, so I think.
Sure. Okay. Do you have any interview tips?
Be excited, but that goes without saying. Be excited and don't be afraid that because you don't have experience in regulatory that would impact your interview. I personally didn't have any experience in regulatory affairs, but of course I had a scientific background. But what they're more interested in is your soft skills rather than, let's say, the technical regulatory knowledge, because that is built upon. But you need to be willing to learn and to learn fast. So I think that's a key skill to demonstrate, really.
Okay.
Yeah, I would maybe add to that, it would be transparency in your interviews. I think it can be quite clear sometimes if you might be embellishing something slightly. So I would say we really value honesty and the company, and if you don't have the experience that they might be asking for, think of how you can gain it, or ask, maybe if you're interested to learn more, these are really valuable things to ask in interviews. If you don't know how to answer a question, be like, well, what would you suggest, and how can I learn from that? And I think that's really valued as well in interviews.
Yeah. So where do you see your career going after the graduation scheme at Roche ends?
I can take this one. I hope it's a very successful one to start off with. Yeah, so I really enjoy documentation. So I would definitely, following my the completion of my graduate scheme, will apply for a permanent role within documentation. There is quite a lot of room for progression. We have many levels within documentation that you can, aspire to. We have the kind of entry-level role, not entry-level role, but the initial role in documentation would be the regulatory documentation scientist, which you can then go to senior and then to principal. And then we do have several leadership team members as well. So there's a lot of room in such a large company, I would say, to progress. So that is what my ideal career progression will be.
Yeah, okay. And for me, and so in program management, I would also be looking hopefully to get a permanent role as a associate program management. That's essentially the next step. And then after that, the progression becomes essentially you have more global responsibilities. So I'd say at the top of the ladder would be a global regulatory leader who kind of works on the strategy of a product throughout the different regions and coordinates the European and American regulatory strategies. But then there's also opportunities. I'd be interested to move into regulatory and the personalized healthcare department or somewhere that's in the non-molecule specific regulatory work. So there's many different options. There's a ladder there.
Okay, and this will be the last question. How diverse is the regulatory affairs team in terms of age group? Oh, no, there's one more after that. So how diverse is the RA team in terms of age group?
In terms of age group?
Yeah.
Was that so? In terms of, I would say, I mean, as graduates, we are the youngest in our department. Maybe by I would hate to do the department of dirty and say by quite a fair way, but there's a lot of experience at the company. People have stayed with the company for 25, 30 years. So and the breadth of the experience there as well is very far-reaching. So I would say anywhere from graduation age to retirement age would be my comments.
Yeah, definitely, and also to take into consideration that we have trainees also in Switzerland, but also interns all across the globe and placement students. So we do make a bit of an early careers bunch.
Okay. And then the last question, in the role of documentation scientist, how does knowledge of the regulatory expectations help when preparing a clinical evaluation for assessment by the regulator? Does the role rely more on clinical or regulatory expertise?
So from that perspective, because we do have our regulatory program management partners at the team, we would definitely provide more of a clinical input in those kind of documents. However, we do have our own sphere of regulatory that we contribute to, definitely more on the document level, what is expected, what we need to include, things that health authorities will push back on if we don't have them. So that's maybe our role in regulatory for that form, I would say. If that answers the question.
Yep. Okay, actually, I could take one more question. So what opportunities are there for labeling specialists?
Well, we have the labeling department.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think they have all levels of, let's say, roles within that department, from entry level all the way to senior labeling specialists. And they work on labels across regions. And the labeling definitely has a very important strategic role in the filing strategies for our products, but also in the maintenance of our products after they're approved. So there's definitely space for senior specialists.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. That was great. If there's any more questions, as I said, you can almost email me. There was obviously quite a lot of questions, so there might be more. Email me and I'll liaise with Liz and Zakaria to answer those questions.